This episode is brought to you by Hostfully. Using Hostfully, you can create a free digital guidebook for your listing so that you can save time creating a professional experience for every guest that comes and visits your spot. Learn more at hostfully.com.
Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.
What's up, guys? This is episode 293 of Get Paid for Your Pad. So I am doing this podcast all by myself. I am in Zanzibar, a beautiful island in Africa. It's a part of a country called Tanzania. And the island is amazing, but the internet's not. And so I'm having a little trouble actually interviewing somebody. That's why I missed last week's podcast episode. But I figured today I just do one by myself. And I wanted to talk about something that I actually haven't really talked about in the past. And that's the topic of Airbnb host fatigue. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it pops up in different searches on Airbnb in Google quite often these days. And, it's basically, it's about Airbnb hosting is really fun, and most people start out, they're super excited. But as they get into it more, it turns out it's a lot of work, and then guests aren't always behaving how you want them to behave. And at some point, it can actually become a little bit frustrating, especially if you're not getting the results you want, and if you have some bad experiences. And it was actually Angie at SmartBnB who pointed this out to me, that this topic was kind of hot. A lot of people are talking about it, and she asked me to write a post for SmartBnB. I've actually written another post for SmartBnB. They've started to develop their blog quite a bit, and they actually have some interesting articles on there. So if you want some cool content, check out SmartBnB, check out their blog, and you'll be able to find my other article as well. I don't know if it's the one about Airbnb hosting fatigue is already up there, but if not, it'll be up there soon. But anyway, I thought about this for a while, and I definitely experienced this myself. So what exactly is Airbnb hosting fatigue? What is it, and what can you do about it? How can you prevent it? What can you do about it when you experience it? Those are kind of the things that I wanted to go over. So first, let me share a little bit of my personal experience, right? So when I started hosting back in 2012 in Amsterdam in my little 2-bedroom apartment, I was super, super excited. I mean, I felt so privileged almost that random people from the internet who didn't know me would just go on this website and then book my apartment and maybe spend their only holiday that they have in the whole year in my apartment, and completely bring their trust and their faith in me as a host. I thought it was kind of incredible, and also at the same time, paying me a nice amount of money to be able to stay at my place. I just thought this was so incredible. The fact that I would be able to stay at my own place and control my calendar, and get paid even more than renting out long term, and also being keeping full control of my unit, which is not the case when you have a long-term renter. I really thought this was incredible, and I was super excited to be welcoming my first guests. I remember I activated my Airbnb listing, and when that first booking came in, it was magical. It was almost like a surreal experience. And I was really wondering, are these people actually coming? I remember just waiting in my apartment for the first group of guests to arrive, and just being just super excited and curious to get to know them, and just thrilled and stoked to show them around the neighborhood, but also, of course, my apartment. It was just such an incredible experience. And I stayed in Amsterdam. I stayed at a friend's place nearby for a couple months because I really wanted to meet all my guests. I was really curious to know, like, who's using this platform, right? Who's doing this? and where are these people from, and what are they doing in Amsterdam, right? Those are all things that I was so curious about. And the first couple months, I absolutely loved it. The experience, meeting all these people. I would take them out for coffee. I would walk them around the neighborhood. A lot of people I really made friends with, and I stayed in touch with a lot of them. Now, eventually, I left Amsterdam. I started traveling, and so I became a remote host, right? I upgraded a friend, and also who used to clean my apartment when I was still living there. And I kind of upgraded her to Airbnb manager, and she took care of my apartment for a very long time, and she did an amazing job. And so, what I would still be doing is the communication, right? And managing the listing, making sure that the calendar is up to date, doing the pricing and updating photos and all that kind of stuff, right? So I was still actively involved in the Airbnb hosting process. And I was still enjoying it for quite a while. But, after a couple of years, it just became a bit of a chore. Guests are always asking the same questions. They don't read the information that you sent them. And then, I started having some situations where guests were kind of complaining about things, especially things that I couldn't really do much about. Like, for example, there was this fish shop near my house, which was awesome because you can buy fresh fish there. But as we all know, this fish doesn't smell very good. So, I had people complain about the smell in the street. I would be like, well, what do you expect me to do about that? You want me to go to the fish store and sue them or something? So, I feel like as the excitement sort of wears off, and these little issues, these little annoyances start to gain the upper hand almost, and you just get a little bit tired, and you kind of stop caring a little bit. At least for me, I kind of stopped caring a little bit. I was just thinking okay, how can I automate this? I don't really want to deal with my guests anymore. Especially not after I've received some 4-star reviews and I felt like, okay, I've really improved my offering, but now people are just complaining about these random little things. But anyway, I was getting a little tired, and I think this is something that happens to most of us. Maybe not all of us, but I think a lot of people will kind of get into this sort of state where you've lost the excitement. You're starting to get a little bit annoyed with your guests. And so I think they call this Airbnb hosting fatigue. That's what it is. It's like an Airbnb burnout. And so I remember this time very well. And also my ratings went down a bit just because I stopped caring. Not completely I stopped caring, but at least I didn't care as much anymore. And that was also reflected in my ratings. I remember losing my superhost status, which was also a result of me just charging higher prices that people were willing to pay. But then the people started rating my place lower as lower value, which makes sense, right? Because you're paying more for the same. So the value rating should actually drop, I guess. But in any case, I remember this very clearly. And I also remember what I did to kind of get out of it, because, I realized this wasn't a good thing, right? I really wanted to be a good host. And, part of being a good host is caring about your guests and building a relationship with them and making sure that they, that they have the best day that they can have. And so I remember thinking, okay, how can I reignite the passion for hosting in myself. And so I think the first thing I did was, I just changed things up. I had a look at my listing and I thought, okay, what can I change? How can I do a better job? How can I make improvements? How can I make progress, right? They say progress is happiness, right? And so whenever you make progress, you feel good about something, right? And so I remember, I think this was the time that I actually found out about Hostfully, and I created my first Hostfully guidebook that I would then distribute to my guests. And I remember that sort of ignited my passion again a little bit, just adding something, just creating something new that I didn't have before. And then my guests, they really appreciated the guidebook as well. So I was getting some positive feedback on it. And suddenly I just, I just felt more positive about this whole hosting thing. Started communicating more with my guests on a more personal level. I think that was the time when I started using WhatsApp as well. I would create WhatsApp groups. And I send pictures to guests or get on a call with them or send them a little welcome video. And I just started to engage more with them. And as a result, my ratings started going back up, and I regained my superhost status. And yeah, that's sort of how I got out of it. So I wanted to share a few other pieces of advice. If you are in this situation, like what else can you do? Now, something that I had already done before as sort of as a necessity because of the fact that I was remote hosting, but I feel like a lot of hosts may be taking on a little bit too much work, especially if you have a full-time job and you're trying to do this on the side with a D. I think there's a lot of things that you could potentially outsource and automate, like things that you are currently doing manually or doing yourself, and somebody else could be doing it. So I'd say have a look at what are the activities that are part of the Airbnb hosting process, and which of these activities are you doing yourself? Which of them could you outsource or automate? And these days, there's a lot of tools, of course. I already mentioned Smart B&B, automated messaging, automated pricing, task management. These are all things that you can automate these days. And so I think, the less time you actually spend working on your Airbnb, the smaller the chance that you're going to get tired of it. Also, hiring people to do the work for you. If you're doing your own cleanings, check-ins, or maintenance, like stuff like that, you can hire people to do these things for you. And that way you make it more manageable as well, especially if you have a full-time job on the side.
Remember when travelers used to buy city guidebooks at Barnes & Noble? Those days are long gone. Today, travelers are seeking real, authentic experiences, and they're looking to you to provide your local expertise and flavor. Hostfully guidebooks are the best way to do this because the information comes directly from you. To learn more about how you can share your local expertise with guests with our digital guidebook platform, please visit hostfully.com.
Another thing that can be very frustrating, I already touched on it a little bit, which is reviews and ratings, right? So I read this article by Seth Porges, who I actually have interviewed on the podcast. He writes for Forbes, and he made a really good point. He talked about the review system in an article and how there's a discrepancy between what Airbnb thinks the review system is about and what a lot of guests seem to think. So a lot of guests, especially the ones who haven't used Airbnb before, they see a 5-star rating and they automatically associate that with the rating system that's used in the hotel industry, right? Hotels have different ratings, different stars, right? A 3-star hotel has to have at least a number of amenities, like you have your own bathroom, a Wi-Fi, air conditioning, or whatnot. And then a 4-star hotel has to have a fitness or something or a gym. And so these hotels are ranked based on their amenities and the luxury and the service that they provide. And so 5 stars is associated with the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, the Marriott, the Sheraton, right? These are hotels that provide a very high level of service, that provide a lot of amenities. And so a lot of Airbnb guests who stay at an Airbnb, when they're asked to rate their stay, that's what they associate these stars with. And so if you have a luxury property and you're actually providing all these amenities and this high level of service, then you're most likely going to get those 5 stars. But if you're operating like a budget Airbnb or you're sharing your home with your guests, obviously it's unrealistic to expect that level of service and those amenities. And so, even though the experience that you're providing for your guest, even though this experience could be completely in line with what could be realistically expected from your guest. In other words, you could be doing everything right, but still get a 3 or 4-star review just because your guests aren't aware of how Airbnb has meant this review system to work. Because the way Airbnb looks at it, it's essentially, it's very different, right? Airbnb basically thinks, okay, if you're not getting 5 stars, then something's wrong, right? A 4-star is essentially, it used to be almost a 1-star, right? I mean, now it's different where Airbnb measures like the average, your average rating. But before they used to just look at percentages, right? They used to say, oh, you need 80% 5-star reviews to be a super host. And so if you get a 1-star or a 4-star, it doesn't really matter. So, we used to say a 4-star is essentially a 1-star. And, and guests are not aware of that. A lot of guests aren't. Some guests are. And as a host, of course, you can educate your guests and kind of let them know that anything below a 5-star is bad for business. But yeah, Airbnb's stance on these reviews, on these ratings is that you need to be getting 5-star ratings consistently. And if you're getting a 4-star, that means there's something's missing, something's wrong. And if you actually, if you fall short of the 4.7 average target rating that they set for hosts these days, then, you get emails from Airbnb saying that you have to up your game and you have to improve your listing. And so, I think Airbnb is not doing a very good job at explaining and communicating to the guests that the review system should be interpreted this way, right? And that obviously causes a lot of frustration from hosts because you're pouring your heart and soul into this, creating this experience for your guests, and then they leave you a 4-star review because you're not able to match what they're getting at the Four Seasons, and obviously that's frustrating, and it creates some sort of resentment towards guests, right? For some hosts, because obviously you naturally blame the guest for not giving you a 5-star review, but really it shouldn't be we shouldn't be blaming the guests because they might just not know. We should more blame Airbnb for not making it very clear to its users that the review system that it works this way. So then, the question really is, like, how can you prevent yourself from getting demotivated from having these experiences, or not just, getting a 4-star review or maybe getting a bad review. And I'd say the first thing is to really understand that, you don't have to be perfect as a host. And also one bad review is not going to kill your business, right? I think the most important thing to remember is that it's not so much about what happens to you. It's more like, how do you respond to it? That can affect your life or your Airbnb business, but in general in life as well, right? So, I think if you get a bad review and you respond in a professional way, you take the feedback serious, even though you might not think it's reasonable. You don't get defensive. Don't argue with your guests in the response to the review. Just stay professional. Just focus on the facts and just be polite. I think if you respond that way, then a bad review doesn't necessarily need to hurt your business. Because in fact, I think responding well to a bad review tells more about the host than the bad review itself, right? Because everybody kind of understands that some people, they're just hard to satisfy, right? Some people just like to complain, right? I'm not going to get into the why, but this is just a fact of life, right? Some people just tend to be negative, and so that's just something that you have to accept. It's part of the business. And it's not going to kill your Airbnb business, right? I understand for some hosts, especially the ones that are financially dependent on the Airbnb business, getting a bad review can cause some stress. But it really doesn't have to affect your business very much at all. If you're getting consistently like pretty good ratings and reviews. Also, some people get pretty obsessed over the superhost status. Like I get emails sometimes from people who are completely freaking out because they lost their status. Honestly, I can tell you from my experience and also from what I've seen from other hosts. It's nice to have the superhost status, but you really don't need it to be successful on Airbnb. I actually, thinking back to the time when I actually lost my status after a couple of years of hosting, I think part of it was because I raised my prices. And so what really happened was that my most profitable period on Airbnb was actually in that period where I didn't have my superhost status, but my profit was really high. Those were my most profitable months, actually. But as a result of losing that status and kind of burning out a little bit, I did make a lot of improvements, and I started building better relationship with my guests, communicating with them more, and then as a result, I actually regained that superhost status. But I also started providing some more amenities, like buying some more things for my guests as well. So that added some costs, and I think as a result, my profit actually ended up being a little bit less than what it was while I didn't have my superhost status. So I mean, the point is really, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all only 5-star reviews. You don't have to be a superhost in order to be successful. So you just don't worry about it too much. Just focus on being the best host you can be. Focus on making improvements, and focus on finding some inspiration, especially in times when you're not really feeling it and you're a little bit frustrated with your guests. Try and find some inspiration. Try and improve, make some improvement, change things up a little bit. I mentioned like creating that guidebook kind of reignited my passion for hosting. But you could also go through your reviews and go through your feedback and see if there's anything that you can improve on. Maybe you can invest a little bit in your property or add some amenities, or find some local businesses that you recommend to your guests and see if you can get like a special deal with them. Talk to the business owners, let them know that you're sending them customers, and these are things that just will lift your spirit a bit, as well as communicating with other hosts. So whether it's on in the Facebook groups online, although I find that reading all the posts in the Facebook groups is typically not really that uplifting, because 80% of the hosts are just kind of venting about their bad experiences. So I tend to not read these Facebook posts groups. I tend to not to read them too much, although I read them sometimes just because I want to see if there's anything, any like current topics going on and stuff. But that's more for the podcast and for my blog, etc. But I think, seeing if there's any local meetups in your area, connecting with some Airbnb hosts in your neighborhood. If there is no meetups, if you can't find any, like you might be able to find some on Facebook or meetup.com or something. But if you can't find any, like you can start your own meetup, right? Like once a month, you get together with some Airbnb hosts in a cafe and just talk Airbnb, share some experiences. I think, sharing some thoughts with other Airbnb hosts can also bring some relief if you have some frustrations with your guests. And then lastly, I think just try and shift your focus a little bit. All right. One thing I learned from Tony Robbins is it's about the questions that you're asking yourself. If you ask empowering questions, then you get empowering answers. But if you ask questions that if you ask the wrong questions, you can get answers that kind of like bring your mood down. So instead of asking like, oh, why am I getting these crappy guests, or why did the guests steal something, or why did they do this, why did they do that, you could also ask yourself like, hey, who were some of your favorite guests? What were some of your best experiences? What has Airbnb enabled you to do? And with the income that you're making from Airbnb, how has it changed your life? What can you do to improve the results? I think these are all questions that you can ask yourself, and that will kind of uplift your spirit a bit. And, also kind of realizing that, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? I mean, I've definitely had my moments since 2012. It's been like 7 years. I've definitely had moments where I was kind of done with it, but then like, what's the alternative? Right? I mean, renting out long-term has its challenges too. If you get a bad tenant, then you're stuck with that person for months or for years. Whereas if you get a bad Airbnb guest, it's only for a couple days or a couple weeks. everything has its challenges. That's just part of the game. And if you may feel like you might want to take a break from hosting sometimes, and maybe you should, you should take a break. But just be aware that the income that you're then missing out on, like you might have to replace that. And what are you going to have to do to replace it? Maybe work more hours or do some other activities, and those have challenges as well. So I think just realizing that it may seem attractive to have like a long-term tenant or do something else, that those things also have their own challenges. So anyway, so I thought it would be helpful to kind of touch on this on this subject. I've never really talked about it before. And before I let you go, I wanted to make a few announcements as well. There's a couple of things coming up that could be interesting. First of all, I'm doing a webinar on September 6th at 9 a.m. PST. That's 12 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm doing a webinar about communication with SmartBnB, actually. And so there's 100 seats. It's if you're listening to this, it's probably going to be tomorrow. It's Friday, September 6th. So if there's still any seats left, then you can join the webinar. We maxed it at 100 people. So go check the show notes on getpaidforyourpad.com. I'll put up a link to register. And also there's a conference coming up on October 31st in London in the United Kingdom that I'm going to be speaking at. I'm going to be in some sort of panel, and I think they want me to do a presentation on stage as well. It's a free conference. It's called Host 2019. And there's going to be a lot of people there. I think there's like 150 speakers or something. A lot of people that are pretty well known in the industry. So I think especially if you're in the UK or if you're in Europe, I'd recommend checking this conference out. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. It's free, so that's always good. You don't have to pay for attending the conference. Of course, London is not the cheapest city in the world, so accommodation is probably not going to be that cheap. But yeah, I'll probably host a couple meetups. I'm planning to go a little earlier, a couple days earlier, and maybe stay a couple days later. So if you're going to go, let me know for sure, and I'll organize a couple get-togethers sort of for anybody who wants to come. So that's Host 2019, October 31st in London, UK. I've also been pretty active on my blog on getpaidforyourpad.com, creating more like new content, but also kind of updating old content as well. I mean, Airbnb is a very dynamic business, or short-term rental in general is very dynamic. Like a lot of things change. There's new insights coming up. There's rules and regulations, and there's just the Airbnb platform changes. So I notice I have a lot of posts that get a lot of traffic, but some of them were a little outdated. So I've kind of gone through a bunch of these posts and added some new content, changed a bunch of things, just to make them more up, just to update them and make sure that all the information in the posts is actually valid right now versus a couple of years ago. So go check it out. Getpaidforyourpad.com. You go to the blog, you'll see that every week I'm posting a couple new posts and updating a bunch of old ones. And so I think it will be useful to sort of check those out and go through them. All right, so that's it for now. I'm flying back to Barcelona in a couple of days. By the time you listen to this, I'm probably already back in Barcelona, actually. So next week we'll have a guest on the show again. So back to normal. And of course, the show notes you can find on getpaidforyourpad.com/podcast. The show notes for every single podcast. And if you're not on my email list, you can get on my email list as well. And then I send out an email for each podcast, so you will never miss one. So thanks for listening, and hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.